for those of you that don't know, originally last year, Doc Adams would have been up for a chance to get back into the Hall of Fame again. It was quite a number of years ago when he missed it by 2 votes. Well, that got pushed out because of all the pandemic stuff, got pushed out to this year. And so while we were hoping the presentation last year would be an impetus to get him elected to the Hall of Fame, we're now going to do it again and hope that now we get to have this happen. So he'll be nominated to be on the ballot probably late November, early December, and then if he makes it to the ballot, would go through the vote for election into the 2022 Hall of Fame. And so what I will discuss today, the entire presentation is probably closer to an hour. So if you see me skipping slides, you'll understand why. I want to try to keep everybody on the schedule as we have so far. So Doc Adams, and the reason I show this screen and let it sit is because of the quote from John Thorne. John Thorne, being the official historian of Major League Baseball, has really given Doc a lot of credit for being the pioneer that he is. And that's really important. I mean, whether I say it or somebody else says it, nobody cares. But when you get John Thorne on board, that's usually a good thing. So this, oops, why did I go so far? Starting off with the bang. Okay, so this, the reason I show this letter, it's really the first time in any of the documentation that the family has, well, actually it's the only time where something to do with Doc mentions a bat and ball, anything to do with baseball. And this is actually a letter that his sister wrote to him. And in the letter, she mentions that I have not been able to play with your bat and ball. Now, when this letter took place in 1832, Doc was still in college. So he had not even yet had anything to do with New York baseball. And so it gives us a little bit of a background that, you know, Doc had an early interest in baseball. This is also another important letter that's in the family archives, and it's a letter from his father. And it's interesting to me because it talks about Doc being offered a position to go to Springfield, Massachusetts, that he turned down. And while you can't say the game wouldn't have happened or the game wouldn't be the same without Doc, you never know, right? And so this was really, really lucky for us that Doc turned down his position in Springfield and was able to go to New York. So as we get into a little bit about him playing baseball, when he went to New York in 1839, he moved there to start his medical practice, and he joined the New York Club, the New York Baseball Club it was called. And then in September of 1845, the Knickerbocker Club was founded, and that's when then Doc got involved with them and was elected vice president right away in May of 1846. The reason I show this scorecard off to the right, and it's just a little bit for fun, and it's kind of hard to read, but if you look at the upper right of that top scorecard, there was an instance showing that there was a fine for swearing. So, you know, people talk about fines in our game and whatnot, but this was really an inter-squad game, so it's hard to say that they would have done it in an actual game. So this was an article that came from the St. Paul Daily Globe in June of 1895. And it's a shortened version of a more popular article that came out in the Sporting News the following year, 1896. If you get a chance to find that article, and if you can't find it, you just ask me and I'll email you the PDF. It is a great, great article, not only on Doc, but just about baseball in general. And so it really gives Doc recognition that he so deserves as being maybe not the father of baseball, as the title says, but a very, very important pioneer of the game. So some of the things from this article that to me are very important. And for those that don't know me in the vintage game, I really try to model what I'm doing within the vintage game around what I've found on research about Doc. And so you can see here, where he's having trouble recruiting. We've talked about how do we recruit, and you can see the struggle that he goes through trying to get players there, and the difficulty that baseball was having to keep the game alive. And then, as he says here, as captain, I had to employ all my rhetoric to induce attendance. And again, a lot of us as captains of the game, of our teams, we know what that's about. He's trying to get people not only to come, to want to be on the team, but to get them to show up for games. The other thing Doc did was make baseballs. And for those of you that know me, I do that as well. Again, it's something that Doc kind of got me interested in from doing the research. But he talks about how for the last 6 or 7 years, he made all the baseballs himself, not only for his club, but for other clubs. And that's really, really important, because if you think about our game, what would it be like without a ball? I mean, you got to have a ball. And so it was important for him, in order to keep clubs going, to make baseballs. And that's what he did. And he also oversaw the turning of the bats, make sure that they were the right specifics for the barrel, that the right kind of wood, they had the right kind of taper. And again, very, very, very much pioneer type work. So as he progressed, in 1847, he was elected the Knickerbocker Baseball Club president. So they thought very highly of him as a relatively new person within the club, to make him president. And then, and just as importantly, now he's part of the Knickerbocker Club Rules and Bylaws Committee. And this is kind of some foreshadowing into what we're going to see in about 9 years from this time, when he gets involved with the actual National Association of Baseball Players Committee. In 1849, he created and developed the shortstop position. And this was different than what we know shortstop as today. So back in the day, baseballs were a little bit softer. They could be hit a long way, but they couldn't be thrown as far. So the position, when he created it, was really one, if you will, kind of being a cutoff man or a relay man, where he would run out to the outfield on a deep hit ball and help get the ball back into the infield. It wasn't until the mid-50s where they started to play that position a little bit more like we know it today. And actually, a gentleman by the name of Dickie Pierce was probably the first one to play it as we would recognize it today. But that's very important, that as a pioneer, Doc bringing the shortstop position into the game. This is just some examples of some box scores. I won't spend a lot of time on them that involved Doc Adams. And so the middle one I like to talk about, and I think most of the people on the call know that, because this is from 1854. So this is before they went to 9 men per side in 9 innings. The game was played to 21 runs or 21 aces. And just an example of a game that when you're playing to a certain score and you don't have a lot of runs scored, you may not ever finish it. And this is a game that ran out of daylight, so they had to stop it. But Doc was involved with that game as well. In 1854, Doc participated in the first baseball convention. Now, this is different than the time of the laws of baseball of 1857, because there was only 3 clubs. But again, it's more Doc getting involved with rules and conventions and making sure that the game is progressing. And then the picture is just an example of some neat stuff that the family has, where he's got they're buttons from Doc's uniform. And this isn't a game uniform situation. This is when they would wear their uniform to special events. They had these more like a cufflink type thing that they would wear. And these are in Marjorie's family's possession. It's really, really a neat thing to have. In 1857, this is now where we're starting to get into the meat of it. Doc is elected president of the baseball convention. And this is very, very important because now we've got the first standardization of rules that all clubs will follow, not just a few. And Doc getting into this position would be very important, as we'll see a little bit later. So out of that 1857 convention came actually in 56, the convention was, but the laws of 1857 baseball. We have what John Thorne refers to as like something like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's really, really, really important part of our history. And so these were first discovered. Actually, a guy bought a box at an auction, bought a box full of maps. He was really interested in maps. And in the bottom of this box were these laws of baseball, these scrolls, if you will, of something to do with baseball. So we took them home and threw them in a drawer, didn't think much about it. Pulled them out not too long ago and decided to go see what they're worth. Ended up selling for over $3 million at a Sotheby's auction. But you can see this is 3 of the 4 pages. The 4th page is missing. We won't find it. But you can see some of the important laws of baseball. So they established the duration of the game to 9 innings and the number of people to a side at 9, and set the base paths at 30 yards or 90 feet. Now, interestingly enough, at that convention, the first pass that was going through to get approved actually had 7 men per side and 7 innings. But Doc and another gentleman by the name of Lewis Wadsworth weren't really in favor of that and pushed really hard to get that changed. And so the final version that was finally passed got set at the 9 innings and nine players per side. And prior to the 30 yards, or what we know as 90 feet, the bases were actually measured by setting 42 paces from home to second and 42 paces from first to third. Now, the size of the baseball field you played on back then was really determined by how tall the person was pacing off the field. And so this is a much more standardized way to set up a baseball field, which is very important. They also defined the pitcher's position to be 15 yards. Before that was 25 paces, again, depending on who marked off your field. But it also limited the number of clubs that you could play for. So they didn't want, players who were, really, really good just being picked up by other teams to play for a game. The specified uniform standards for the bats and balls. One thing you will always see as you read through the Beatles dime book or even Haney's going forward, the very first rule or law is always about the ball, and the second one is about the bat. And so they standardized that for the ball with a weight and a circumference, and the bat with a minimum or the widest part of the bat, or what we would call the barrel, to how big that could be. In 1858, he was elected to the chairman of the Rules and Regulations Committee. Again, another role, putting Doc in a pioneer position. So this is a little bit about a event that Doc was involved with back in 1858. And it's really the first all-star game, if you will. It's called the Fashion Racecourse Games, where it pitted the best of New York against the best of Brooklyn, those being really separate territories, if you will, back then. Doc served as the umpire for the 3rd game, and this ball is actually in the Hall of Fame, the game that Doc had umpired. And you can see off to the right there, one of the box scores from that 3rd game, where you can see Doc was the umpire. This was the first time, I had to think about why I had this slide in here. This was what they believe the first time that baseball, whoops, it went to the screen, made the front page of a New York Times. And it was talking about that Fashion Racecourse game. So this is one of the first known pictures of 2 teams gathering for a photograph after a game. Whether it's the first or not, I haven't seen the solid research, but This is the New York Knickerbocker Club on the left, and off to the right is the Excelsior Baseball Club of Brooklyn. The game was won by the Excelsiors 20-5. Doc is the one standing under the red arrow. But there's also some other famous people in here. Harry Wright is 2 over from Doc, and then 3 over from the umpire, who's in the middle there, is Joe Leggett, who was one of the best catchers of the day. This Doc finally resigned from the Knickerbocker Club in 1862, and his resignation really was due to the fact that his wife was expecting. He was made an honorary member of the Knickerbockers and then proclaimed the Nestor of baseball players, which really is, again, a high recognition for him. And this is a copy of a letter that James White Davis wrote to Doc. And what I found interesting about this, at the very end of the letter, he makes a note, even though, okay, you're retired and blah, 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 you're a great person, playing commences on the 21st, as in, you know, hey, come on back. if you're interested, we'd love to have you. And this is a picture of the scroll that they gave Doc, giving him the title of the Nestor of baseball players. So a little bit about his post-baseball years. In 1861, he did get married. And again, it's really believed to be part of what drew him into retirement. His wife was expecting at that time. But you can see one of the quotes that he gave is that his marriage was the crowning achievement of his life. You know, much more important to him than baseball. And I always like to believe that most of us that are playing now believe that too, that we'll always put our family first as much as we love it. In 1865, he moved to Ridgefield, Connecticut. His mom wasn't well. It gave him a little higher health, or higher altitude for her health. And then in 1870, he was elected to the Connecticut State Legislature. So, you know, he didn't just retire from baseball and kind of disappear. You know, he wanted to continue on with you know, being somebody, you know, involved in a community and whatnot. So 71, he became the first president of the bank, which he served for 10 of the next 15 years after that. And what's interesting is still today, when they send out their credit card information, Daniel Adams is the name that's shown on the advertisement. So he's you want to get a credit card at this bank, you're going to know who Doc Adams is. In 1875, they had a reunion, a Knickerbocker reunion, and they invited Doc back to play in that game. And it was interesting. The game was made up of the old Knickerbockers, if you will, from the 1850s and 1860s, and called the veterans, and they were playing a game against the new kids on the block, if you will, the current set of players. And you can see, if you look at the scorecard, or after 3 innings, you know, the game had kind of gotten out of hand. So after 3 innings, Henry Chadwick was umpiring the game. Whoops, but went ahead too far there. Henry Chadwick was umpiring the game. And after 3 innings, James White Davis said to the veterans, you know what? We're getting too old for this. It's a little bit chilly, a little bit damp. I'm going to take you guys down to the local pub, and we're going to you know, get some pints of ale and enjoy the rest of our day, and then let the young kids finish out the game. This is a letter that Henry Chadwick wrote to Doc in 1898, and this was in response to a letter that Doc wrote to Henry Chadwick. And so Doc was trying to recognize Henry Chadwick as the father of baseball, and Henry wrote back that really the father of baseball is out of place. You know, ball or baseball, like Topsy, never had no fodder, it growed up. And Topsy is a reference to, I believe, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which I don't want to get into. But again, it's just Henry Chadwick, you know, and Doc kind of recognizing each other as the father of baseball, and getting Chadwick to recognize Doc was pretty important. So Doc's final years, this is from his grandson, Roger. His interest in baseball continued to the end of his life. Even after he was 75, he would occasionally join his sons in a neighborhood scrub game and astonish the boys with his batting. So he participated in some bat and some ball games after his retirement. Obviously not at the level he was before, but Doc was also very proud of. Didn't want a lot of spotlight, if you will. And he says here in the quote, "I've been content to consider myself an ordinary, everyday worker of the world with no ambition to fill its high positions." So even though he did a lot of that, and he never really, patted himself on the back, if you will, just went about his business as it was everyday business. And this is Doc Adams' obituary. So he died January 3rd, 1899. And even then, they recognized Doc's importance to baseball through the obituary. So what's next? The top two things are really things that have happened in the past. And in 2014, the SABR, Society of American Baseball Research, honored or recognized Doc as one of the overlooked 19th century baseball legends. And that got him some notoriety. In 2015 was his first appearance on the Hall of Fame ballot. I kind of mentioned that earlier. Missed it by 2 votes, which was a shame. And then now the 2021 winter meetings coming up as the next time Doc would be considered. He's not on the ballot. He'll be considered for the ballot. And then should he get on the ballot, we'll then go forward with a vote. And we have every confidence that not only will he make the ballot, but that he'll get in this year. So if you look at the dates of things happening in 2015, we didn't have the discovery of the laws of baseball yet. And we didn't have all of the quotes from John Thorne. So I think those 2 things in itself should be enough to get Doc the 2 votes that he needs. So while I went quickly through this, if you want to learn more, and there is a lot more to go through, if you go to the website noted at the bottom there, www.docadamsbaseball.org, you'll find a ton of information on that. And so with that, I will stop sharing and open it up to questions and try and keep us getting out of here by 4 o'clock.
Just in case some of you get the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum magazine, they featured an article that included Doc Adams called In Position. And I don't know if Corky's seen it yet, but I think they did a nice job in this article, Corky, of specifying exactly, they went position by position on what Doc's contributions were to the game based on the different positions in baseball. So if any of you get a chance to look this article over or get the magazine or get to your local library, I recommend it. It's apparently it's, what does it say, volume 43, number 20, number 2.
Yeah, it just came out this month, and just as important or even more important than them getting it right in the story they wrote up is that the distribution of that going to some key people that may even have some influence on how they vote. Because that's always been the hardest part of this is we don't know who the voters are. We don't know who to try and get information to because that's all kept secret. And there's no way to really find out. And so the more publications that we get out there that might land in one of those voters' hands, the better chance we got to get them in. So.
Thank you, Corky. Thank you for your presentation today. And hopefully people that aren't on this call at the moment, when we get it back up on our YouTube site and our VBBA website, people will take the time to review what you just shared with us about Doc Adams.
And behind me on my screen, I've got a replica of the laws of baseball framed, and a lot of the baseball's presentation from the presentation I gave at the Hall of Fame for, how to make the baseball. So I've got the Knickerbocker uniform and my Doc vest. Kind of got a nice little Doc Adams Hall of Fame in my own basement here.
Nice. Very nice.
if you
And of
didn't
course,
already know, I
if
was
you
a
want
Doc
to learn
Adams
about
director.
making baseballs, you guys know to go to the BBBA website. I forgot what link it's under, and we've got Corky's entire video presentation and slideshow on how to construct a baseball, and he's always there to give advice, which is really cool. There aren't a lot of people of Corky's with Corky's passion for the game that are available to our baseball community. So for those that are still on the call, take advantage. I'm sure Corky is out there as usual to help whenever way you can. And I suppose I should put a plug in, Corky, for your Zoom meetings. What day of the week are they on?
Tuesday nights from 7 until whenever we stop talking.
Yeah,
Central Time.
Central Standard Time, right?
Yeah, love to have anybody join that wants to join.
And that's a Facebook page, right? So if they need to look for times and whatever, they can get to it through Facebook, correct?
Yep, just type in baseball as 2 words, baseball Zoom,
There you
and
go.
you can get a link to the events, or just ask to join the page and you'll get the links.
I guess this is where I'm the designated driver, and I want to thank the remaining 16 participants for staying through the whole thing. I hope that this was enlightening for you. And someone, of course, has asked, will we post all of this? Because a lot of this information, you can only take in so much at one time. So please take advantage of that. I don't know exactly how soon that'll be. I usually go to Kelly Ryan at Go Live Sports. She breaks it into segments and then we put it up. So in the meantime, go back to the website and look for the previous conferences. You'll find a lot of useful information there. So with that, I guess, how do I do this? Do I sign it out, or is Rudy going to do? I can click end.
I think
right?
it's you. I think you have to end it.
It's on me. Thank
Yeah.
you, everybody. Thank you, everybody that watched, and thank you, everybody that presented. You've made it a very good conference for a very difficult year. Goodbye now.